The ability to read people, it isn't just a skill. It's a superpower that can change your life. And today we've got somebody who's mastered it. He's training under Chase Hughes, one of the world's leading experts in human behavior and influence. And in this episode, we're diving into how you can read people instantly, build trust fast, use psychology to win in more business, sales, and everyday life. You're going to be able to spot the hidden emotions and body language cues, why most people don't communicate as well as they think, and how to fix it. So if you ever wanted an edge in business, sales, this episode is for you. Let's get into it. Walk me through. I'd like to start off though, like how did you come into the world of sales? And then give us a little bit of a tale to like where you are now, just so we have an
Yeah,
idea.
absolutely. I got into high ticket remote sales specifically in the middle of COVID. This is back in 2020, and everything's shut down. A couple of places, I think this was like November of 2020, and a few places are starting to open up again. And I had spent most of my life, most of my adult working life in restaurants as either a bartender or a server, mostly a server, sometimes a busboy. Just I wore a lot of different hats, but I worked in restaurants for about a decade, and that's all I ever knew was just working in restaurants. I've worked in a bunch of different restaurants, and that was kind of at the time that was kind of my future, man. Like that was my projected path. That's all I saw for myself because I didn't know anything else. I didn't graduate from college. I didn't get a degree. I didn't really I didn't really see anything else other than, maybe if I work hard enough, I'll own a restaurant one day, and then that way I can be 40 years old and tell people I still work at a restaurant and have some significance behind it. So that was kind of like my mindset. Um, November 2020, I was working at this place I live in Atlanta. I was working in at this Spanish tapas place in downtown Atlanta. And I hated it, man. Like the whole time I ever worked in restaurants, I never liked it. I would make good money, but back then good money was making $150 at the end of a 12-hour shift, and you're breaking your back and you don't have time to take a piss, and you don't have time to eat, and you're just taking shit from people all day just to make $150. And so um, I remember this feeling. I remember working a shift, and I'll never forget this. I uh, I was bartending that day, and I had a full bar. There were guests. I was the only one behind the bar. There were guests everywhere, and there were people waiting to get a bar seat. So it was really full. It was like a Saturday night. It was packed, and I excused myself to go to the bathroom. I went to the bathroom, and this was like my 12th bathroom break. I used to take bathroom breaks like every 5 minutes because I'm just like any little pocket of free time or any little pocket of, time to myself. That was like an escape for me.
I feel
And
that.
I'm in there and I'm not doing anything productive. I'm just doom scrolling because that was my only semblance of freedom. And I'm scrolling and I'm on Facebook and I come across a Facebook post from a friend of mine, Christopher Schroeder. If you're watching this, this is you know this story, but this is for you, man. My buddy Chris, he makes a Facebook post saying hiring remote triage setter. Those three words, I had no idea what those three words meant. I didn't know what that meant. The only thing that caught my interest about that post was a couple things. It was work from home. So that's like light bulb number one.
For sure.
Set your own hours, work when you want. Light bulb number two. So there's time and location freedom. And then light bulb number three was make make $600 to $800 a week. And for me, that was like the nail in the coffin, man. That was it. So what I did was, if anybody's listening, I heavily encourage you to take what I'm about to say as educational only and don't actually do this. But what I did next, when I saw that, I didn't even respond to the post. I literally walked out of the bathroom, and the bathroom was like in the kitchen, which was like in the back of the restaurant. So I walked out of the bathroom and then I just made a beeline for the back door and I just walked out. I had a full bar. There were guests at the bar, just full bar. I was the only bartender.
Oh
My
no.
managers, all the other people are like wondering where I'm at. And I just
God.
walked the hell out. I didn't say a word to anybody. I just walked out. And on my way out, I specifically remember making a promise to myself that this is it. I will never set foot in a restaurant again to be an employee. I will never work in a restaurant again. There's something here with this Facebook post. I have no idea what it is. It could be a scam. It could be a ripoff. I have no idea what it is. But there's something here. Let's see what it is. Let's see where it takes me. Anything is better than this at this point. A little bit more context. I had recently gotten engaged. I'm 28 years old. I just
Congrats.
proposed to my now wife, and I started having this flash, this vision of me at 40, 50 years old, still working at a restaurant, raising a family. I'm like breaking my back, working 12, 15-hour shifts, coming home, feeding kids on like a meager, $150 a day. And I'm like, I just can't do that. This is not my future. So I left. Long story short, I walked out. I responded to the post, and I said, hey, dude, if you haven't considered anybody for the position, I'm in. Let's do this. Got an interview, got hired on the spot, and that first week, I had no idea what I was doing. Again, this was all new to me. The whole remote world, I didn't know anything about this. I didn't know this realm even existed. And the guy, Christopher, the guy who hired me, my training when I got hired, he gave me a script and he said, I'm going to load up your calendar with some calls. They're like these 15-minute calls. Just read the script and pass them on to the closer. That's all you have to do and you'll make money. I'm like, well, shit. I don't even have to close them? That sounds easy enough. Like, I don't have the pressure of like having to close someone. Sign me up. So I treated it like it was the most important thing in the world. Like I treated it like I had just discovered the cure for cancer. I put all of my heart and soul into this first position, man. And it was one of those niche offers too. It was a really niche offer. It was an offer that teaches people how to flip smartphones for a profit. So you buy broken phones, you fix them, and then you sell them on eBay for a profit. It teaches people how to do that. And the only reason I knew about this offer is because I was one of the students, because I previously had a side hustle doing that stuff. And so that's how I knew the people who ran the thing. And so I started, and that first week, the first week of me triaging, again, having no idea what I was doing, just reading off of a script, I think I made like $1,000 my first week because I was just relentless. It's like I treated it like a 9 to 5 and I just worked nonstop. And I made $1,000 my first week, and that first $1,000 commission, that was the check mark for me in my brain that told me, okay, there's definitely something here. Let's go deeper down this rabbit hole and see how far it goes. And so that was just the first domino, man. That was domino number one in a very long series of events that kind of led me here. From there, I moved up to a closer position and I started learning how to close. The only training that I had was I got to hop on the guy who hired me. He was taking closing calls, and so I would hop on a FaceTime with him, and he would set his phone like off to the side, and then I would just watch his face. I would watch him close, and I would just like take notes on all the questions he was asking. I'm like, holy shit, I've never heard of anything like this before. This is so cool. This is unlike any other sales thing I've ever heard of before, because I come from a very pushy sales background, and so this was like, damn, like you're really going deep with these people. You're really getting emotional with these people. This is really cool. And so then I started taking those calls. I started closing. I started making money, and then I started. I think the longer that I was on that first offer, the more calls I took with that first offer, and the more sales I made with that first offer, it was just more confirmation for me that there's definitely something here, and I can definitely make a career out of this. Like there is something here where I can, I can pay my bills with this. I can support a family with this, and there's no limit. Like it would take me 12 hours to make $150 as a waiter. Here, I could make a $500 commission in 45 minutes. And so it was a huge mindset shift for me.
For
And
sure.
so that led to, me exploring other offers. Shortly after that, we're in 2021 at this point. I want to say several months after I left that first offer, um, I joined my first like official like team, like an actual organization, like a high producing organization, and that was an organization that you and I both know by the name of Impact Clients, ran by a guy that you and I both know named Richard Yu. And that was my first experience on like a really high performing team, a really high pressure team. Like there's SOPs, there's all this stuff in place. It was like being in the military. And that was also my first time moving up to a sales manager position. So it was my first experience leading and growing a team. First
And
time
how did
I
that
ever.
come about? How did you go like from like being a closer to coming into Impact and becoming a the sales manager? How did that?
Yeah, when I was, that's a good question, man. When I was on that very first offer, that phone flipping offer, um, I made it very clear from the get go that I was hungry for more. And they
Mm.
were very clear with me, and I'm still friends with all of them to this day. They're wonderful people. They made it very clear that, hey, we're happy to allow you to grow within this company, but there's only so far you can go here. Like I can call you a manager, I can call you a CEO or a CSO or whatever, but you're not going to be making much. You're like it's just a title. If you want actual growth, I would encourage you to look at other offers. So they were very upfront with me about what to expect, and I respected the hell out of that. And I just started putting my feelers out there, man. I started. I think one of the people from that original offer, that first offer that I was on, I think it was Chris, the guy who hired me. He had mentioned Richard's name in passing, just very like it was a very throwaway thing, like, oh yeah, and by the way, there's this kid, he's 23, his name's Richard Yu, he's doing like 700K a month, and then on to the next thing, and
Crazy.
that like 700,000 a month, that stood out to me. I'm like, there's no fucking way, there's no way, there's no way. And then another thing, yeah, he's doing 700K 100% organic, and I'm like, it's not even paid ads, and he's doing this. I gotta go see who this guy is. And so from there, that led to me like stalking Richard's Instagram and Facebook. I think I wound up on his email list, and then after I was on his email list, I got an email that said we're hiring full-time closers, make 15 to 20K a month, and that's when I filled out an application and did that ridiculous video that we all had to do to submit. But yeah, that's how that happened. That's how I ended up on that team, which is crazy because I had a lot of firsts with that offer. It was my first time. It was my first learning experience on an offer where I learned what not to do to lead a team. It was my
Mm.
first time leading and managing a team. It was my first time hiring and firing, and it was also my first time coaching. It was the first time I ever got a taste for coaching. And I think that was the spark that ignited the flame that's still alive today. It was that first initial coaching experience, getting to coach the clients that came in, the Wednesday and Thursday sales coaching calls. That was addictive right from the get-go. And it was then that I realized I have a passion for impact. I have a passion for helping people, and I have a passion for coaching. There's just something about pouring into other people that I didn't realize I had. Maybe a little bit of it from when I was waiting tables. I was very charismatic. I was very good with people, and I think I developed a lot of that in the restaurant industry. But I think a lot of it is just inherent. And from there, it only grew stronger, man. And fast forward to today, I've worked many different offers, many different positions since then. But today, I'm sort of out of the sales game. I say sort of because I'm always going to be involved in sales in some capacity, but I'm not involved
Sure.
in the space. Like we call it the space. I'm not really as involved in the space as I once was. I'm more in, I always saw sales as kind of a stepping stone to that next thing. And for me, that next thing was the deeper level of sales, which is human behavior. And I'm not talking about, Jeremy Minor human behavior or NEPQ human behavior. I'm talking about the actual mechanisms that make humans behave the way that they do, not just in sales, but just as humans. That's something that always fascinated me. And once I started going down that rabbit hole, that was just an even deeper passion that I found out that was just insatiable. It was just like one of those things, you wake up and you have a day where no matter how much you eat, you're always going to be hungry, and you're just like, no matter how much you put down, you're always hungry. That's exactly what it's been like for the past 3 years, ever since I discovered human behavior. Right now, I work with Chase Hughes, who is, for those of you who don't know who Chase is, he's the world's,
Absolute goat.
yeah, the world's number one guy on human behavior, body language, influence, persuasion. He teaches and trains the CIA, PsyOps. He teaches the Department of Defense. He trains them on high level influence and persuasion scenarios in very high stakes situations. So it's like if you think about Jason Bourne, he trains those kind of guys. Like that's who that guy is. I work with that guy.
Nuts.
Yeah, and I'm 100% bragging right now. I am absolutely bragging. I'm name dropping right now. I absolutely 100% work with that guy, and I'm not ashamed to name drop. But but yeah, I work with him right now, and my focus right now is pretty much strictly on coaching and making and giving the best experience I can to his clients. And along the way, I'm also learning a lot about myself. I'm learning, just being under his wing, I'm learning so much, and it feels like drinking out of a fire hose every single day. And passing that along to people and just watching people have journeys of their own and just these transformative experiences of their own has been nothing short of fulfilling. But that's kind of the zigzaggy, disorganized version of the story. But that's the rough story of how I got here, man.
I love that. I love that, Cameron. And where I think I want to dive in, because I feel like for this episode, I really want to focus in on the vast experience that you've had since you've gone down the psychology route. So, what was the entry point? Where did you first learn about human psychology or, Chase Hughes? How did that start?
I learned about Chase the same way I learned about Richard Yu. It was on accident in passing from someone else. I wasn't actively looking for anything at the time. I wasn't researching human psychology at the time. I wasn't researching body language or anything like that. If anything, I was neck deep in sales, and I was just looking for, what is the next sales training I can take to make me better at reading a script and objection handling and all that stuff. And there was a sales trainer that I was working with. His name is Brady McCarty. I'm still really good friends with him. And if you're watching, Brady, I love you, dude. I was on a Zoom call with him, and he had one of Chase's books on his desk in the background, and he made a very brief mention of it. It's called the Ellipsis Manual. And he mentioned Chase's name, and he's like, yeah, I'm learning from this guy. He wrote this book called the Ellipsis Manual. This guy, Chase Hughes. It was another very throwaway thing, a very nonchalant thing. And he's like, yeah, he's like the number one guy. He kind of gave me a brief synopsis of who he was. And then he connected that to, yeah, I'm learning all this stuff. It's making me 10 times better as a salesperson. I'm understanding, people's hidden fears and motives and desires before they even open their mouth. And I'm able to pick up on these cues and handle things before they're even vocalized, just by reading certain cues. Like, I can tell when people are being deceptive. I can tell when people are holding back. I can tell what people need from me, like what compliments I can give people based on their profile. And I'm like, that's fucking next level. Something about that, or something about I don't know if it was the way he said it or just the timing or what, just this combination of all these different variables that came together at the time. It just made me, it made me go, I gotta learn more. Like there is something here. I gotta learn more about this. I gotta deep dive this. So that led to me taking his very little information that he gave me on that call and just clinging to that and researching the hell out of it. I ordered. I remember ordering two of his books that day right after that call. I Googled them, found them on Amazon, ordered them. I
Which books did you get?
The Ellipsis Manual and the 6 Minute X-Ray. And if you're just starting out, if you just want to start out and get your feet wet with human behavior and that kind of stuff, those two books will give you everything you need to know and then more. Like you could read the Ellipsis Manual alone, and there is enough information in there to create a Manchurian Candidate. It's that deep. And he has way deeper stuff. That book, as deep as it is, it's probably 1% of what he actually teaches and what's actually out there. But I started with those two books. I found a bunch of his courses online. I took all of his courses. I eventually joined his mastermind. He's got like a 1 year long mastermind. And from there, I don't know. It was just this fire in me. It was that little voice that we all have. We all have this voice that's in the center of your mind that's telling you, this is it. Like, this is the thing. Kind of like that same voice I had when I was at the restaurant. I walked out and I'm like, there's something here. I'm burning all the boats. I'm not looking back. It was that same voice again, telling me there's something here. It's time to leave sales, or it's time to start taking those steps away from sales and into something else. And that was it. And so I made a goal for myself shortly after I discovered Chase and started learning about his stuff and reading more of his materials and really studying his methods and concepts and everything. I made a goal for myself that I was going to work with him. I don't know how. I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't know when or why or if this is going to happen. I just know that I'm going to be on his team in some capacity. And fast forward 2 years, I shook enough hands. I put myself in front of enough people. I got in front of the right people, and I landed on his team. And I've been to his house. I've got his number. Him and I text each other on a regular basis, and
How
it's
bizarre
crazy.
is that?
What's that?
I said, how bizarre is that? Like,
It's
from
fucking
going from
bizarre.
like someone that's like your absolute, not idol, to put him that way, but like, he was the thing you were following, and then 2 years later to be working with him and actually interact on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I still can't wrap my head around it even now. And like I'm coming up on a year, almost a year of being on his team and working with him and being in very close proximity to him, and I still can't believe it. Because a part of me is like, yeah, I mean, obviously this happened. You took all the steps, you did everything to make this work. But then the other part of me is like, dude, you are still just that person who is a fan. Like, you are still that super fan who's just fogging up the windows from the outside. Like, I think we all have that imposter syndrome. There's that little part of me that's like, dude, do you really deserve this? Because there's so many other people out there that are more qualified than you. There's so many other people out there that would be a better fit. But I'm like, no, fuck that shit. I worked hard for this. I put enough fuel and passion and work and energy into this, and I am where I am because of the decisions I made and because I set a goal for myself and I just didn't stop. And there were times where I never thought I was going to get there. There were times where I thought, okay, this is just a pipe dream. But I kept going. I was relentless, and I made it happen. And so, yeah, man, it's still very hard to conceptualize, and it's still hard to kind of like wrap my brain around just the reality of the situation, man. But it's a dream come true, dude.
And Cameron, I mean, walk me through what do you think was the first lesson that you learned from him? And it doesn't have to be when you were directly working for him, but I'm curious, like, what was that first thing that you tried and you're like, oh my gosh, wow.
That's such a good question. I have an answer, but it's not going to be what you think, and it's not going to be what you want to hear. But I'm going to tell you anyway.
Please do.
The first thing that I learned from him, um, believe it or not, was not a technique or a trick or a tactic or anything. It was a concept. It was an
Mm.
idea that completely changed my worldview permanently. It was one of those things that, like, when you learn something, you can't unknow it. Like when you see something, you can't unsee that. Right? It's like when you're a kid and you find like a dildo in your parents' room for the first time. Like you can't unsee that. You can't unknow that. It's just one of those things that like permanently etches into your brain, and you're like, I can't, like, everywhere I look, I can't unsee this. So that thing for me was the fact that every human is suffering and insecure, and we are all every adult is the product of childhood pain and childhood reward. That that just completely knocked me off my chair,
That's amazing.
because it explains everything. It explains everything. If you're dealing with an asshole at work, or if you're dealing with some douchebag that cuts you off in traffic, it's not just some dude in a tank top covered in tattoos. It's an 8-year-old kid who got bullied and who made a promise to himself that he was never going to let anyone hurt him ever again. And so that changed the way that he behaves. It changed his outward behavior. It changed the way he presents himself to the world. That behavior that we see, that asshole behavior, that behavior that we're so quick to label and judge, that
Mm.
behavior, if it could talk, if behavior could speak to us, it would just say something along the lines of, don't hurt me. Don't get too close to me. Don't hurt me. That's all people are saying with their behavior, especially like standoffish behavior, is just, don't hurt me. And that, I think, gave me just a slap in the face of empathy and understanding, and just compassion for people, because we're all wounded little kids. We're all what I like to call wound collectors. We're a collector of wounds. And the sooner that we can see that in people, the sooner that we can see that we're all suffering, even me, no one is immune to it. We're all insecure. We all just mask it differently. We all have different ways of hiding it. Um, the sooner we can see that, the sooner we'll have, I think, a lot more respect and a lot more empathy, and it will just change the way we communicate with people and communicate with ourselves. So, to answer your question, that was the first thing I learned from Chase that set the groundwork for all the cool shit, for all the tactics and all that stuff. But that was I think the most important lesson I learned was the fact that every human on the planet is suffering in some capacity.
Mm. Man, it's true, right? Like, I think when you start to look around, and you know, I've been going down that rabbit hole myself lately of kind of like yourself 3 years ago, finding Chase Hughes and going through and learning and starting to see things that you can't unsee.
Yeah.
How do you think that shifted things for you? Like, how did that impact your mindset and your life when you had that piece there?
Man. Well, it's not just the empathy and the compassion that comes with that. Like you have more understanding and patience with people. But I think the biggest thing that shifted was my communication. And the reason I say communication is because I think your success as a person is it comes down to three things. It comes down to your ability to read people, so observation. It comes down to your ability to have mastery over yourself. And then it also comes down to your ability to communicate with other people and with yourself. And so I think communication, good communication, or let me back up. All influence is a byproduct of really good communication. And really good communication is a byproduct of being able to see suffering first. Chase has this like code of honor that he kind of lives by, and he teaches his students. And the rule number one is see suffering first. And I think it's a domino effect where if you kind of see people through the lens of, okay, this person's suffering, this person feels to some degree like they're not enough, this person feels XYZ, that will change the way you see them. And when you change the way you see something, you change the way that you communicate. And when you change the way you communicate, you change the outcome. And so having those positive outcomes is a byproduct of all of that stuff. So I think the biggest thing for me, too long don't read, is the communication piece. It really impacts, or it really impacted the way that I started communicating with people differently.
And how do you start to notice people suffering? Like, what were those things that you started to notice? I mean, you gave the example of the guy that cuts you off, and he's not an asshole, but he's an 8-year-old boy that's suffering and been bullied his whole life, vowed to never do that again. Like, what else are you noticing in terms of suffering? Are there different types of suffering that people commonly associate with, or how does that look?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a it would be a much shorter list of the ways that people don't showcase some kind of suffering, right? And it's all there. It's, the thing that I had in the beginning, the problem I had, or the struggle that I had, was I was unable to see it. Like, I understood the concept, but I was unable to, like, I can't see, so like, this looks like a happy person. I can't see suffering there. And another lesson I learned really early on, something Chase taught me, is that he said, the data is always there. The suffering is always there. You just haven't trained your eyes well enough to be able to see it. That stood out to me, because it's like,
Oh,
and something else he says is, people say you can't judge a book by its cover. We've all heard that. That's a very catchphrase. It's a very
everyone
cliche
says it,
thing.
right?
We can't judge a book by its cover. We can if we have the right eyes. That's just another one of those chaseisms that blew me away. So your question is, what are the different ways that people, like, the different ways that people are suffering? People don't showcase their suffering in ways that you think that they would. People don't walk out onto the street with a frown and boo-hoo in public. People
Yeah.
don't do that. People, every human wears a mask. We all wear a mask. Everybody, you, me, every human on earth. It's a mask does two things. A mask projects an image to the world. It's, hey, this is how I want the world to see me. But a mask also serves another purpose, and it hides the thing that's underneath it. It conceals the thing that's underneath. And so if you look at people in terms of masks, how is this person masking their suffering? I'll give you a couple of examples. So we all know a person who thrives on feeling significant and important. In some ways that can show up, it's very common in the remote sales space too. You go to someone's profile and they're standing next to, like, a Lamborghini, and they're wearing designer clothes. And underneath their little bio, it says, I teach entrepreneurs how to go from 0 to 100K a month. DM me for more details. And then they're making Facebook posts about, I was just in Dubai the other day and I just spent $20,000 on a watch. No big deal. It wasn't really that much money anyway. So all that stuff, all that data is telling me, someone like me, that this person wants to be seen as important and significant and as standing out and making an impact. We call that significance. It's a need.
Yeah.
So how that relates to suffering is, on the other side of our needs, on the other side of our mask, is we're concealing something. So if I'm projecting an image of significance to the world, what am I hiding? The thing that I'm hiding is usually the opposite of what I'm projecting. So the thing that I'm hiding is, I might have a deep fear and insecurity around feeling insignificant, around feeling small, around feeling invisible, around feeling dismissal, and around feeling abandoned or social ridicule. I might have experienced one or more of those things in my childhood, and I may have subconsciously learned behaviors and mannerisms as I grew up to cover up those behaviors. And so if I see somebody who's projecting like significance, wealth, all that status, I'm just looking at the other side of it. What is the opposite of this stuff? And that's likely how that person is covering up their suffering. Another example of this would be this is a very common one. People have a lot of people have a need to feel included or accepted. We call this acceptance, or like group. Think about like group acceptance. And so this will show up. This is really easy to spot. You'll be like at an airport and or like at a bar, and you see somebody like wearing a 49ers jersey and a 49ers hat, and they have a 49ers lanyard, and then their arm is covered in like logos. They're like tattoos of logos. So like they have an Apple logo tattoo, and then they have like a Harley Davidson logo tattoo, and over here they have Harry Potter tattoo, and then they have Star Wars tattoo. And so what they're saying is, I am a member of all these tribes. I belong. I belong to these tribes, to these, fandoms. And so what that means in terms of suffering, if someone wants to be seen as belonging, the opposite of that is what? Isolation, abandonment, peer mismatch, feeling lonely. And so people who have a need for acceptance might have some fear and some suffering around abandonment or isolation. But that's kind of how, to answer your question, that's kind of how I see suffering in people. I just kind of ask, what is this person trying to tell the world about how they want to be seen? And what is that image likely covering up? And so that kind of gives me, like, my brain can then autocomplete and just kind of fill in those gaps from there.
And do you find that it's fairly, like, is there ever times where that's not the situation?
Of
Where
course.
it's like,
Yeah,
how
absolutely.
often would you say that is the case where it's like it's kind of the opposite of that? Or yeah, like I know nothing's 100%, right? Like nothing could ever be. But how can you tell the difference between if it is real and genuine or if it's like you said, like kind of the puffing up to be able to mask that other side?
Yeah. I'd say the nothing in life is 100%. So the worst mistake that you could ever make is to assume that one thing means one thing. And this is something that Chase actually teaches. It's called he calls it the attribution error. We attribute meaning to certain things, and we put an overt amount of importance on one thing equaling one thing. And so what that does is it gives us confirmation bias, and we ignore the context. And so the most important thing when you're profiling someone is it's not the mask, it's not the behavior, it is the context that's causing that stuff to come out. Because if I'm at a rock concert, I'm going to act completely differently, and I'm going to behave differently. I'm going to dress completely differently than if I'm on this podcast. So I'm the same person. I have the same childhood, two different contexts. Those contexts are going to dictate two completely different behaviors. So if you're profiling me at a rock concert, you might get a completely different synopsis than if you're profiling me right now, because those are two different people. So context is always key. If somebody crosses their arms, this is the mistake a lot of people make with I read in a magazine that arms crossed means this. That's the biggest bullshit ever. But if you ever see someone cross their arms, this could just be comfortable for them. This could just be like they're open, they're connecting, they're like you're having a good conversation. This is just a comfortable thing. Or, dude, it's the middle of winter. It could just be cold. They're just doing this maybe because they're cold. They're not being standoffish, they're cold. So I look at the behaviors. I look at clusters of behaviors. So like it's not just that one thing in isolation. What can I pair that thing? What other behaviors or indicators can I pair that with? And then how can I match that with the context? And so as a whole, I'm looking at data as a whole. That gives me a likely answer to, okay, this is likely the cause of what's going on. That was a very roundabout answer. You said, how often is that the case? I would say, depending on your profiling skills, if you're like a world-class profiler and you're very good at reading people and you know the differences between the different contexts and everything, I'd say it's like a 90-10 split. There will be like 10, maybe 5 or 10% of the time where you could take a stab at something, you could take a guess, and you could be wrong. And if you're wrong, that's fine. You just recalibrate and you move on, you keep going. But 90, maybe 95% of the time, you can get a pretty accurate read on someone.
I feel that. I feel that because I mean, look, I'm a complete novice when it comes to this stuff. It's very, very early in the game, but I feel like I can already see it within looking in family, looking in friends, looking in prospects. You know, you just start to pick it up, and then you have the conversation, and you almost like validate it by the end of the conversation. You're like,
Oh
ah,
yeah,
cool, that was right. You know
100%.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So I definitely agree with you. I think it's well, it's like what you said earlier, right? When you see it, it's hard to unsee it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
Yeah,
and
it's one of those things where once you know this, it's kind of like a universal truth. And once you know this universal thing that applies to all humans, it's hard to forget that. It's hard to
hmm
it's like you've reached this new level, this new layer, and you're seeing people through this new layer. And once you reach that layer, you can't go back down to the previous one. And so it's just a different level of awareness. Um, kind of like finding a dildo. It's like you're like, well, shit, I can't unknow that. Uh, so it's the same thing. It's like once you see something like that, or once you understand that concept, you start seeing it everywhere.
yeah. And for you, right? When when you learned that, how did that lay the foundation? No, no, not how did it lay the foundation, but like what did it lay the foundation for moving forward, right? Because I know you started this journey going down like how can I improve my sales process? How can I get better at talking to people? And it
Yeah,
escalated, and we're going to get to that. But at the
yeah.
beginning, when it was towards the sales side, what did you start to change? What started to shift in your calls?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think the first thing that shifted for me was my level of uh, my level of empathy for tough prospects because we all, as salespeople, and I know you've dealt with this, every salesperson who's worth their salt is going to deal with the type A and the alpha prospect, right? The person who 5 seconds into the call, like, hey, I don't have time for this. Just give me what you got. Give me your price. How much is this thing? That kind of person. Um, I think the first thing for me that changed was my composure speaking to those types of people and my ability to see through that behavior because that behavior is very paper thin. Like that behavior that they're putting out is extremely thin. And once you understand that every human is suffering, the more someone is suffering, the more it's going to show outward. And so people like that are just showcasing a lot of suffering inside. Because if you are 100% confident with yourself and you are just 100% okay with who you are and you have a really good relationship with yourself, that's contagious. You can feel that when you're around someone who's just full of joy. You can feel that. You transfer that feeling to other people. But when you feel like you are missing something, kind of like I have this bottle of water. If the water represents my level of confidence, uh, and the empty space represents ego, the less confidence I have, the more ego takes up that space. The more confidence I have, there's less room for ego to be in there. And so that's the thing. A lot of people, especially salespeople, and I think this is one of the reasons why the sales space is so toxic, is because salespeople uh, mistake confidence for posturing and for that alpha behavior. They assume that that behavior equals confidence. That is the opposite of what real confidence actually is. So to answer your question, the thing that shifted for me on my sales calls was seeing through posturing and fake confidence. I was able to distinguish fake confidence from genuine confidence. very quickly. And that impacted my communication with those people as a byproduct. And then a byproduct of that was, helping more people and making more sales and having just a lot more fun.
And when you say you're able to see through that, like what would you do? And we'll go through both, but what would you do if you saw fake confidence, right? Where you saw someone and you feel like they're posturing.
It all depends on what's going on. This is one of those
Sure,
things
of
where it's
course.
not
It's a,
like,
it's a big question, right?
yeah, if I see that thing, there's this one magic phrase that I say. It's like a Harry Potter spell, and I just say this phrase, and it just shuts them down. It depends, man. Like, are they a male or a female? What's going on? Like, what's the context of the call? Are they
Yeah,
doing
well,
this at the
we'll,
beginning of the
we'll,
call,
we'll
at
lay
the end of
the
the call?
let's lay a scene here, right? So we can kind of see it. Let's say it's a business offer, biz op offer, right? Teach someone how to make money online. They're a male in their mid 40s, okay? Jumps onto the call right at the beginning. They're just like, "Hey mate, yeah, just want to get to know the price and what's included so I can make a decision. I got stuff to do." Setting the
Cool.
tone very quickly.
I'm happy to give you all of that, my friend, and I can even pull up a sheet that has that information on it. As I'm doing that, real quick, is everything okay? I'm sensing there's something off in the energy, man, and I'd love to have a conversation with you, but you seem a little distracted and a little rushed, and man to man, I just have to be transparent with you. So if now is not a good time, why don't we reschedule? And again, I'm happy to have a conversation, but is everything all right?
Oof. So just call it right at the beginning.
Call
I
it.
love that.
But it's not just the words I'm saying. Like these words,
Yeah.
I could transcribe them, or like if you're watching this, you could go back and like write down everything I just said. That's not what's gonna change. It's not the words you say. It's the energy from which you're saying the words. It's where you are speaking those words from. So I'm
Yeah,
speaking
it felt
those
like from
words
the heart.
from from the heart and from a genuine place of actually caring about the person. I'm speaking as if I'm talking to a wounded child who just came to me and said, "Hey, I'm getting bullied and I'm really sad." Like that's how I'm speaking to that person. Like you have a daughter. Imagine your daughter came to you and she's crying because somebody on the playground shoved her and she's upset. How would you speak to her? That's exactly how I'm speaking to that person because that's who I am speaking to underneath the whatever's on the outside.
And now if we go the other side where someone similar situation, but they have you feel like it's a real confidence, right? They're not like they're just like, "Hey mate, look, I respect what you do. I'll be honest, I'm fairly flat out busy at the moment. This looks fairly interesting. I just want the details so I can make a decision."
Sure. Would you rather reschedule this call? Because if you're looking for details, I can totally appreciate that. All the details are on the website, and I can just like text you the price. But I think it would be more worth having a conversation and just getting to know who you are as a human. So if you are pressed for time, I respect that. We're all busy nowadays. It's a crazy busy world we live in. So I'll leave it up to you, man. Like we could do a rushed call. It might not be as high quality as if we were to reschedule, find a time that's a little bit more appropriate, and we can get to know each other before we talk about going to bed on right after the first date. So it's up to you, man.
And you can see the two different types. You can feel.
Yeah. Yeah,
You can
man.
feel.
And I'm not, this isn't some scripted thing that I memorized. This is just like,
Sure.
this is all just like, I made those words up on the spot. This is all just it's coming from an intention. So you have to be intentional with your words. You have to be intentional with how you're speaking to the other person because where you speak from, you speak to. So if I'm coming from a good place, I'm going to speak to that same place in the other person. If I'm coming from a place of fear, if I'm coming from a place of anxiety, if I'm coming from a place of selfishness, it doesn't matter how I sound or what I say. I could give you the best script, but if I'm coming from a place of like, I don't give a fuck about this person, I just want to make a sale, that's what's going to hit. That's what's going to resonate in the other person's brain. So I got to be really careful about not just my words, but where those words are coming from.
It's that classic saying, someone sounds like they have commission breath, right? It's not that they're saying things
Wait.
differently.
That is such a, as cliche as it is, and as much as it makes me cringe, that is so true. It is 100% true. People can smell that shit.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
Walk me through, right? When that's a situation, okay, you've gone through in a call, you're moving through with the prospect, and now instead of at the beginning, you hit a sensitive topic, and they just try to brush past it, right? Like maybe you ask for the scenario you're in cost of inaction, right, in the call, and you talk about their family, they just kind of brush past it real quick and like turn and
Yeah.
focus on something else.
Well, that's easy, man. That's an easy one. That's
We'll
that's
start
that's
off
it.
easy.
That's it easy. So there, if we're in cost of inaction, it is assumed that everything leading up to cost of inaction was me setting up the cost of inaction. So like the way I see it is everything is a wedge. Everything in sales and all of influence is a wedge. So it starts off small, and then each thing you do, each step just prepares them to receive the next step, which is just a little bit bigger. It's that wedge gets a little bit deeper. And then those two steps prepare that person even more to make them more vulnerable for the third thing, for that wedge to go even deeper, so that by the time you get to the end, that wedge is all the way in. But it's not, you didn't just go from 0 to 100, from nothing to all the way in. You did it very gradually. So by the end, it just seemed like the logical next step. So that's how I treat cost of inaction in like every phase of a sales call. What are all the little things I did in my behavior, in my questioning, in everything before cost of inaction to prime them to be open and receptive and suggestible to the cost of inaction? So where when I ask them a super difficult question, I'm not coming out of nowhere with that question. They've been prepped for that question. So when I hit them with that question, it's just like the logical next thing to do in their brain. It's like, oh, this makes sense for this question to come now after everything I've been through. So just wanted to set it up with that. If I'm in cost of inaction, I ask a question, they brush past it, I'm not going to let them get away with that shit, and neither would you. You and I both know the answer to that. No good salesperson who's worth their salt is going to let someone get away. A beginner or someone who's just reading a script reader is going to go, oh, okay, cool. Well, I guess that sucks. Well, I guess we talked about everything. Are you ready to dive into the program? That's what an average person would do. Someone like you or me, if we got that person who brushes past cost of inaction, we go, hang on a second, Chief. I've been getting to know you. I'm pretty good with people, and I can always tell when I'm not getting the full story. So let's rewind the tape about 15 seconds. And I know there was more behind that. So I'll ask again, and then I'll just ask the question in a different way. So I'll call them out in a very friendly way. I'm not being an asshole. I'm being very direct, but I'm being friendly. And so that gives me a permission slip to be direct with people. If I'm in enjoyment and excitement, and I do it in a way that they know they're being called out and being held accountable, but I'm not being an asshole about it. I would do exactly that. I would call them out. I would say, okay, let's go back and let's bring it out. What is X, Y, Z, whatever that question is? And then I would just keep going. And then that way they know they're not going to get off the hook. They know they're not going to be let off the hook that easily. And so they'll answer the question. They'll either give a good answer or another half-ass answer. And if they give another half-ass answer, you know what happens. You call them out and you keep going until you get the answer that you want. That's just basic sales, man.
It is basic, but it's funny because for you and I that makes so much logical sense, right? And it just second nature to this point. I kind of give the example of I go to the gym, quite a bit. I've always grown up around the gym, and I mean I can tell you
I
like to
can
work
tell.
out and keep yourself fit.
Yeah.
And you were to ask me something about the gym, it'd be like, what do you mean? Like, of course, like just that's second nature, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, of course you start lighter before you jump into a heavy set. You got to
Oh, yeah.
warm up. But then you
100%.
have some people that it's not second nature, man. Like they'll walk into the gym and throw a plate on and be like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna go for my heaviest set without
Yeah.
warming up."
Yeah.
And it happens in sales too, where a lot of these, a lot of people in my that watch the podcast, it's a mix of everything, but they're newer to the space. They don't know these things yet. They're just coming in. So what would your advice be to someone that is on the newer aspect about building in, not just in cost of an action, but in terms of the sales call in general, calling people out on that? How do you best do that when someone isn't giving you more than surface level?
That is such a good question, man. And this is something that people just don't talk about this enough. People do
And
not talk about this enough. Sales trainers do not talk about this, and this is so much more important than the words you speak. Um, if you look at the top salespeople of any company, any offer, any company, not even just in remote sales, but just pick any like Fortune 100, Fortune 500 company. Look at this, like take all the top salespeople and just stick them in a room and analyze what they have in common. I guarantee you, I will bet the deed to my house that these people are not the people who have the best script. They're not the people who have the best tactics. They're not the people who ask the best questions. They're not the people who say the best words. They're not the people who have the best objection handling techniques. It's none of that stuff. The thing that they all have in common, all top salespeople have the one thing in common, and that one thing is that they are amazing with people. They have good people skills and social skills. So your question was, Cameron, what advice would you give someone who's a little bit more of a novice, who's a little bit newer to this stuff? My advice is stop focusing on the color of the doorknob before the house is even built. And that means stop focusing on what words to say before you even build a foundation of confidence and social skill. Go out there and learn how to just have a conversation and carry a conversation with people. Learn how to be a good listener. Learn how to be interested and not interesting. Learn how to tell a good story. Some of the most charismatic people, some of the if you look up a guy by the name of Myron Golden, he's a speaker, super charismatic guy. The reason why he's so successful and the reason why he has 80% you can close 80% of a room on stage uh, is because he's a very good storyteller. He's very good at connecting with people. He's has very good social skills. So work on your social skills. Have the ability to carry a conversation with someone without worrying about, oh my God, what am I going to say next? I have nothing to say. So what? Get comfortable with silence. Get comfortable with listening. Get comfortable with people. And learning sales on top of that will be a piece of cake. Sales is like your sales ability is like sprinkles on a cake. In order to decorate a cake with sprinkles, you first have to have a pretty big cake to begin with. You have to have a cake there in the first place in order to add sprinkles to it. So have your cake and then decorate it. Build your house and then start looking at doors and doorknobs. And so start with the cause, and then the symptoms will happen as a byproduct. That would be my advice.
It's very interesting, right? I think COVID created some very interesting sales reps. When I think about sales, I I think about the charismatic dude that's good at conversation that, you know, didn't plan to be in sales, but like life was there. He's like, well, I'm good at talking to people, so I'm going to do sales,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I get it. That's kind of what happened to me. Um, but it's interesting because I feel like there's become a very there's like a movement, a generation where now it's like people that went through those, you know, the ones that are 19, 20, 21, 22, that went through that like social period during COVID where they were locked down and they didn't get that social cues by going out and having conversations, and now they're just on sales calls. Like, besides in a conversation like this, they don't interact with people. And it's very interesting. I've talked to quite a few different people about it, where like it's really, really hard for these people, and there's not anything that they're doing wrong, but it's they
Mhm.
haven't gone out there and built how to have a genuine conversation. They haven't had
And
the
it's
life experience of that.
yeah, and it's not just COVID. Think about people who are who are younger. These like I don't even know if it's Gen Z anymore. There's like whatever the thing is after Gen Z. I can't keep up, man. I'm a millennial, but I have a boomer. Like I'm a boomer at heart, man. What these younger people who grew up they grew up like post year 2000. They grew up with technology, with screens. And so these people who are like late teens, early 20s now, they grew up only knowing social interaction. Like 90% of their social interactions are through a screen and through an algorithm. People say like, can algorithms influence us? Um, 70% of couples today meet from a dating app. A dating app is a series of algorithms. A lot of people get married from dating apps. So your marriage is the result of an algorithm. So yes, algorithms can absolutely and do absolutely influence you. And so we have these younger people, this fresh generation growing up with screens and not as much socializing, not as much interaction. Like, how old are you?
I'm 25.
25. Okay. So you're a little bit younger. I'm 33. I grew up in the 90s. I was born in 92. I grew up in the 90s, and that like we didn't have phones and iPads and that stuff growing up. We just played. Like I just after school, I would sling off my backpack and I would just run outside and run over to the cul-de-sac and just play in the dirt and scrape my knees and go swimming
Yeah.
and play with my friends on the playground. And like the playground at school, like we would get in fights and we would play on the jungle gym. Now you go to schools and like kids are just huddled around on their phones. Like if you back in the day, like when I was growing up, if you saw a huddle on the playground, it was Pokemon cards. Like we were like those that shit was intense, man. There that was like there talk about beef. Like you had beef with someone that you whipped out your Pokemon cards. Like that's like you're flexing, man. But it was I think there's a difference in the social aspect of how we grew up, like the different generations and how we grew up. And so the new generation now who grew up with very little actual human interaction, who's used to they're used to talking to people and dealing with their emotions through a screen, very artificially. COVID happens, and nothing really changes because they already grew up on lockdown.
Yeah.
COVID didn't change much for those people. COVID didn't change much for people who are used to being on lockdown. The way I see it is these people, and it's nobody's fault. It's just I think it's social media, the rise of social media, and just this weird culture we live in that kind of teaches us and reinforces us to be separate from each other and to just kind of rely on our screen. Um, I think the way I see it is like we grew up with like we grew up inside of a prison cell with the door wide open, but we choose to stay inside. And all COVID did for those people was just shut the door, but it didn't change anything that they did inside of that cell. And so then COVID happens, and then there's this boom of remote sales. And like, I think remote sales happened because of COVID. COVID caused remote sales to come into existence. And so you have all these jobs, like all these remote jobs, all these sales offers popping up left and right. And these people, these young people are getting these remote jobs, but they don't have any foundation of like actual real social skill. And it's not saying that you can't develop it, virtually, not saying you can't develop it through a screen. But the best way, in my opinion, to develop your ability to speak and interact and have a conversation with somebody is to do it in person. Sure, it's scary. Sure, it makes you nervous, but so what? There's tons of stuff that make you nervous. There's tons of stuff. That's part of life. Life is full of a broad range of emotions. You're going to get nervous sometimes. You might as well get nervous around things that will actually develop and grow you as a human being. So again, my advice will go back to, these younger people who are watching, the people who are newer to sales. It's nobody's fault. My advice is spend a lot of time, invest a lot of your time developing your social skills, developing your confidence, real confidence. Develop your understanding of the difference between confidence and posturing. And stay away from people who teach you how to posture and label it as confidence. Learn to communicate. Just work on your communication. Learn how to communicate. And if you can master communication, if you can master interacting with a human, if you can master listening, just listening. Like if there's one thing, just listening. People are so self-absorbed. There's so many self-absorbed people that when you talk to somebody who actually listens to you and makes you feel like the only person in the room, that alone is a fucking superpower. Like to make someone feel special because you are so invested in what they have to say, it's free. It doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't cost them anything, but you're giving one of the greatest gifts that you could ever give to someone. So be a good listener. Go on YouTube and look at research people who are good at this stuff. Research people like speakers who are good at this stuff and model off of them and master that skill of communicating and developing that communication muscle. And I think you'll be unstoppable. The sales skill, skill is the easiest thing to learn. Skill, anybody can learn a skill. Not everybody has the communication thing down. So that's what I would invest a lot of my time into. And that's the advice I would give.
I love that. I want to pivot for a minute. And I want to, because you have a vast knowledge now, on different pieces of psychology. So I want to get your take on, and I want you to basically psychologically profile the different sales trainers and what you feel on each of them. Okay, I feel like this will be some fun. So Jeremy Minor, let's start with
Jeremy Minor. What do you want to know about him?
I just want the first 30 seconds when you think about him and his archetype, how you would profile that person.
He's self-driven. So we have this thing, something we look for is the way that, where is someone's focus in a conversation? Is it around self or is it around team? So what I mean by that is somebody who uses, I pay attention to pronouns here. So if someone's speaking and they use the word I, me, my a lot, they make the conversation kind of about themselves. That's a self-driven person. If you hear people say things like we, us, them, all of us, together, team, organization, that's a team-driven person. And one is not good or bad. Everything I'm about to say is not good or bad. It's just information. This is just information. You draw whatever opinion you want to draw. Jeremy Minor is a self-driven speaker. He centers conversations and topics of conversation around himself a lot. He's a very big significance-driven person. He has a very big need to stand out, to be seen as important, to be seen as a leader, to be seen as making a difference, and to be seen as just an impactful person. That would be the big thing. And then I would say the thing that drives his decision making would be a social aspect. So he makes decisions that allow him to be seen by others and that allow him to connect with other people, for other people to connect with him or to draw other people towards him. So that would be my 30-second synopsis of him. And just with those 3 pieces of data, I could not only use that as a telescope into his past and probably draw a bunch of childhood shit out of that, but I could use just those 3 pieces of data for massive levels of influence. If I'm in a conversation with someone like him, those 3 pieces of data can come in very, very handy. Even if it's just something as simple as how can I connect? How can I take that connection slider and just move it up to the maximum level, I can use those three pieces of information to do that, amongst other things. So that's Jeremy Minor for you.
Cole Gordon.
Intelligence driven intellect. I knew that was coming, man. I knew Cole Gordon was coming. He's an intellect guy. He has a need to be seen as intelligent. He's analytical. His I would say his value, Chase Hughes talks about like there's different values. He's an information value person. I would say a secondary value for him would be freedom. So his number one value is information. His primary need would be intelligence. He has a need to be seen as intelligent.
Bill Walsh.
I know Bill. He's a good guy. He's a strength and power driven person. He has a need to be seen as strong and powerful, but he also has a need to be seen as, we talked about acceptance. So he has that acceptance need paired with a strength need. He's a lion. He's like, that guy's a lion heart. No bullshit. He's very upfront. He's very direct, and he's very composed under pressure. This is a man who is throughout his entire life, he has developed this remarkable ability to be completely calm under pressure. And he's built that and he's developed that, and his life experiences have kind of shaped his ability to just be totally composed and totally relaxed where others would crack. But yeah, I would say the two things that stand out about him are he's acceptance driven and strength driven.
Andy Elliott.
I don't know Andy Elliott or enough about him to be able to give you a profile on him.
Fair. Grant Cardone.
Grant Cardone is another strength and power driven individual, and that's also paired with significance. So he's status and wealth paired with power. There is a lot of posturing that comes from him. He's a very big posturing guy. I'm not a big fan of Grant Cardone. I know these words are going to be very taboo to a lot of salespeople. I don't like Grant Cardone very much. I think there's a lot of principles and concepts that are cool that I agree with, but I'm not really a big fan of Cardone. But yeah, he's a power guy. He's a power guy. He's very kind of like Jeremy Minor, very self-oriented. And then his decision style is a little bit different than Jeremy, whereas Jeremy is socially driven, like a socially driven decision maker. Grant Cardone is an investment driven decision maker. So he's asking himself, will this decision bring me the biggest return on my investment?
Jordan Belfort.
I don't know too much about Jordan, but of the little bits and pieces, like other than the movie The Wolf of Wall Street, I don't know much about the real Jordan Belfort to give you like an accurate thing. So anything that comes out of my mouth would just be an opinion. I don't have enough information on him. I haven't really studied him that much.
And lastly, Matt Ryder.
Matt Ryder. I love Matt. I think Matt's an awesome guy. In fact, if Matt is watching this, and I know he might because he was one of your first guests.
Very first.
Yeah, I love Matt. Matt's a great guy. Matt was one of the first guys I started learning from. There's this 2-hour objection handling masterclass that I saw when he was like really deep within EPQ and Jeremy Minor in 7th and stuff. And I remember watching that thing every day and taking so many notes, and I memorized that desert island analogy. I memorized all like that fat versus fit analogy. I memorized all these hooks and analogies and reframes and frameworks. I made so much money just off of that 2-hour recording of him breaking down objections and objection handling. Matt Ryder is responsible for the first at least $50,000 that I made in commissions in my sales career. So I think Matt's a great guy. I think Matt is a significance and acceptance person. So need to be seen as impacting other people and standing out, making a difference, and then the need to be accepted into a tribe and accepted and belonging to a group or to a tribe.
All right. Thank you. That was fun. That was
You
fun
got
to
it,
be
man.
able to see some of the different ones. Now, you
Yeah.
used a few different tools in there. Can you walk us through what you were using? I know you did at the very beginning, but can you walk us through the two? You use like the significance side of things, like what was important to them. You also used, I can't remember the name of it right now. Walk me through what you were going through your head when you were profiling that.
Yeah. So there's typically three things I look for when I am profiling someone cold, and I've got 30 seconds. I've got like limited time, and this is like a cold profile. In this case, it wasn't really cold because I knew of most of these guys. But if I've got very limited time, I'm going to default to three things. Number one, what are their needs? And when I say needs, I'm not talking about like Maslow's pyramid or like survival, shelter, belonging. Like I'm not talking
Sure.
about that stuff. Self-actualization. That's not when I mention needs, I'm talking about Chase Hughes has the needs map. And so what that refers to is our social needs that we seek from other people socially. And there's six of them. There's the need to be seen as significant. There's approval, acceptance, intelligence, pity, and strength. So pity is like, do people see how bad I have it? Do people see how my situation's worse than everybody else's? We all know someone like that. Intelligence is, do people see me as being really smart? Do people see me as like intellectual? Approval, do I have permission and recognition from other people? Before I take action, I need permission from an authority figure. These are like people pleasing people. These are people who over apologize. These are people who, in situations that are high pressure, they shrink themselves to make other people feel more comfortable. Those are approval people. So those are the needs that we seek from other people that give us, think about them as like our dopamine pathways. So like if you can make me feel significant, then I receive dopamine. If I can make you feel powerful, you receive dopamine. If I can make you feel acceptance, you feel dopamine. And so if we can feed each other these needs, it's like we're injecting dopamine in each other. So that's what we seek socially from people. The next tool that I use is what's called the decision map. All of this is just Chase Hughes speak. The decision map guides or it dictates how someone makes choices. This is what drives our decisions. Whether it's buying a car, buying a case for our phone, or choosing a friend, or choosing even a romantic partner, we kind of pass those decisions through one of six filters. And those filters are deviance. So do I stand out from the crowd? Do I break away from social norms? The next one would be novelty. Is this new? Is this the new thing? Is this the new thing that's exciting and shiny object syndrome? And is this the new gadget that I'm going to wait outside of Best Buy at 4 in the morning for? Is this the new CD? Is this the new show that I'm going to recommend? Then there's social. Is this going to draw others towards me? Am I going to get compliments? Am I going to get recognition from people? Am I going to bring people towards me? So this is someone who wears colorful clothing, or they have like a glittery phone case, or they have like diamonds on their watch, like something where other people will notice them. Social. The next one is conformity. Are other people in my peer group doing the same thing? And would they approve of this? So this is kind of the opposite of deviance. Like I want to go with the crowd. I want the proven path. I want the road that's mostly traveled. Like I want to blend in with the herd. The next one is necessity. This is my wife. Is this decision absolutely necessary? So these are people who do crazy amounts of research. These are people who will have like a 6-year-old iPhone that's cracked and they don't get another one because they don't need one because theirs works just fine. These are the people who have the shoes that are like talking to you. Those are necessity people. It's like, yeah, I don't need another pair of shoes. And then there's the last one is investment. These are your Grant Cardones. These are people who ask themselves, will this decision bring me the biggest return on my time, energy, and money? So they're always kind of like passing decisions through like that ROI framework. So there's that. That's number two, the second thing I look for. And then the third thing I look for are values. Values. So this is what we want most out of life. So like if I had a life savings of $1 million, this is like my value, whatever my value is, this is what I would spend my entire life savings on. It's that important to me. It's like the thing I've been wanting the most out of my whole life. And there's six of them. And those six values are freedom, information, like access to information, data, opinions, ideas, that kind of thing. Freedom, information, recognition, experience. So like people who travel a lot, people who, go and do different things. Those are experienced people. Growth. Almost everybody in the sales space is a growth value. Like, is this going to allow me to grow? What's going to challenge me so that I grow and develop myself? And then connection. So is this going to allow me to connect with other people and to be surrounded by other people and to just have that genuine connection with people? So those are the three things I look for, because those, in my opinion, those are the three things that are the most leverageable. Sometimes you will only get one of those things right off the bat. Sometimes you have to do some digging to get the other two. Sometimes all three will just kind of shine a light like a neon sign in your face. Sometimes you'll get other pieces of data. Like, for example, for a couple of them, Jeremy Miner was one of them. I didn't get the values right away, but I got his pronouns. So we call them pronouns. So like, is he using self pronouns or team pronouns? What direction does he focus his conversations, inward or outward? And so that's another piece of data that I got from Jeremy, just right off the bat, just thinking about him and having 30 seconds on the clock. So again, another very exorbitantly long answer to a simple question, but those are the tools that I lean on when time is a limited resource. Needs, decisions, and values, because with those three things, you can tell just about everything there is to know about a human being. You can, if you know how to weave those things into your communication, if you know how to intertwine that data into the way you speak to someone, you can get someone to do pretty much anything you want them to do just with those three things.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. I think getting more and more into it, it really is just such a hack. like
Yeah.
like it's a hack on life. You can implement it, and I don't like to use the way like get what you want, but like genuinely, you just start to understand it. Everything makes way more sense.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's like a person's brain is the only thing you're ever dealing with. See the brain, not the person. And so if you're in a sales situation, or if you're just in a human situation, you're in the grocery store and you're talking to the cashier, all you're ever dealing with is a 3.5 pound sack of meat inside the person's skull. That's it. And the only two things you're leveraging in any influence scenario are electricity and chemicals. That's it. That is literally it. And genetics, but electricity, chemicals. Those are the only two things you're modifying in that person's brain. And if you think about influence is kind of like taking a cross section of the brain and opening it up and looking at it as like the cross section of a lock. Every brain has their pins. You know how locks have pins? Every brain has their pins in a different order. And so if I can see, so this information, the needs, decisions, values, each of those things are like individual pins inside that lock. And if I can identify those pins and know exactly where those pins are, then I can craft the perfect key that's going to fit inside that lock. So when you understand the stuff, you said it was a hack. It absolutely is a hack. If you can understand this data that everybody is giving to you all the time, you just have to be able to see it. If you can understand it and interpret it, all you need to do is learn how to take that data and intertwine it into the way that you communicate with them. And that is the equivalent of shaping a key that's molded to fit that lock perfectly. And you can unlock influence in that person's brain. So it's that's kind of the way I see it. I'm sure there's a ton of other analogies, but yeah, man, it's fun stuff for sure.
Why do you think sales trainers, or heck, even a lot of salespeople in the space, don't focus on that side of things as much? Because what we're
Because it's
talking
not
about right now
attractive.
is very taboo.
Yeah, it's not attractive. It's not sexy, and it's not as marketable, in my opinion. The thing that sales trainers focus on is words and ideas.
Hmm.
So you take the top closer of like any offer, and the average closer manager or offer owner or whoever is going to go, okay, well, the top closer is producing a lot, so let's backtrack and figure out what he's saying to close these deals. And so they'll go and they'll go, okay, well, he's using this analogy a lot, and he's using this he's using this script, and he's using this reframe, and he's using this method, and he's using this and this and this word track. So we're going to copy paste these, and we're going to give these things to all the reps in the on the offer. And that's just not how it works, because what you say there, if you look at the brain, if I can get neuroscience-y for a second, there is no structure in the brain that's designed for language. Like our brains are the part of our brain that makes us a human being. It's called the neocortex. That part of our brain is it's very new. It's one of the last pieces of our brain to evolve. It's only about 200,000 years old, and there is no section or structure in that part of the brain that is for language. There's two very tiny areas about this big called the Broca's area and the Wernicke area, and this is for speaking. So when we speak, this part of the brain lights up, and then when we interpret what we're hearing, this part of the brain lights up. That's it. That's all we got. And so when we are influencing someone, we're not influencing language. We're not influencing with words. We're influencing with behavior, because behavior speaks to a different part of the brain. Behavior speaks to the mammalian part of our brain, the part of our brain that's like a copy paste of what you would find in like a dog's head. That part of our brain that doesn't understand words or reasoning or logic, it only understands emotions. Some people call it the limbic system. It's where our emotions and gut feelings come from, that deeper animal, like primal part of our brain. If you were to go back in time, like if you were to step out of a time machine 100,000 years ago and speak with your ancestors, you can't use like a language pattern to influence them. Even if you spoke whatever language they spoke back then, if you were to like translate in their language some crazy closing technique, that's not what influenced your ancestors. The thing that influenced your ancestors was authority and obedience and tribe, and the biggest thing would be novelty. Cameron, what's novelty? Novelty is something that is another word for it that people overuse, in my opinion, is pattern interrupt. So
Sure.
if I'm walking in the woods one day and I'm walking by this bush, and I walk by this bush every single day, but then one day I'm walking by and a stick snaps behind that bush, that's new. That's a new thing. I'm not used to that. And that's going to capture my
Mm.
attention. How much of my attention is going to be on where I'm going? How much of my attention is going to be on my family or my kids? All of my attention is going to be on what the fuck made that stick snap. That's what kept
Yeah.
us
What's
alive.
happening?
Exactly. That's what kept our ancestors alive. That's what kept us going and procreating as a species. Those things. And so these are like inborn loopholes that are in our brain. Authority is another one. If we are around somebody that we perceive as an authority figure, we are wired in the same way that we're wired to respond to the snapping stick. We are wired in the same way to respond and be hyper obedient to what we perceive as an authority. We are in the same way, we are also hyper responsive to the bandwagon effect, social proof, the tribe. This is why advertisers and infomercials and Facebook ads use social proof. That's why social proof is so powerful, because we are very heavily responsive and influenced by what the tribe is doing and what the tribe thinks of us. And so all these little things all these little things stack up, and they are a byproduct of who we are. If we have enough authority, if we have enough confidence, if we work on ourselves and master who we are as people, we can tap into those deeper sections in the other person's brain. And this all of this bypasses language. So you can be a genuine authority person, you can have all these elements, and still you can suck. You can have like the world's shittiest script and you can still close people. You can still be a very good closer because it's not the script, it's who is reading the script. And so again, this all goes back to that advice that we talked about. Like, hey, Cameron, what advice would you give the newbie? Work on who you are. Work on who you are as a person. Work on yourself in such a way that if you were to meet your ancestors, they would respect you as an authority, even if they didn't understand your language. So it all goes back to that, man. It all goes back to where are your words going? And you asked me, why do you think sales trainers work on this stuff? Sales trainers focus on thoughts and ideas and words because it's the easiest thing to learn. It's the easiest thing to leverage, and it gives us the biggest placebo of having learned an actual skill. It's what I like to call the skill placebo. We learn this like really cool reframe or this really dope script, and that gives us this like little hit of dopamine going, oh, fuck, this is cool. I'm going to go close so many people with this thing. And then when it doesn't work, we get the cognitive dissonance kicking in that goes, oh, well, maybe it was just the prospect. I just had a shitty prospect. It'll work on the next one. So that's why it's sexy, it's marketable, it's easy, and it's a very cheap hit of dopamine and a very effective placebo thing, in my opinion.
Why is it that you can, like, when someone walks into a room, someone that has authority, someone that has that confidence, you can like feel when some people walk into a room, there's like that sense, and there's other people that can walk into a room and you have no, like, you didn't even notice they were in there. You're like, what? When did you come in? Like, what is that? Where does that come from?
Yeah, this is something that Chase teaches a lot. This is one of the first thing that Chase teaches, like influence-wise, is the stuff you do off camera, the stuff you do behind the scenes, the stuff you do in the dark when no one's looking. That's the stuff that shows up when you walk into a room. So like that person who can walk into a room and immediately gain credibility, gain trust before they even open their mouth, before people even know who they are. They're already on people's radar. They're already sending those signals of like, hey, I can trust this person. I don't know who this person is, but if shit hits the fan, I know I can go to them. That is all a byproduct of that person's lifestyle and habits and internal traits off camera when no one's looking. And so there's this little thing called nonverbal leakage. Nonverbal leakage. What is nonverbal leakage? Nonverbal leakage just refers to the areas of our private life that are the most likely to leak through or shine through when we're in front of people. And so there's five of those. There's 5 areas. There is your environment. So if you are going to a party, just imagine going to a party and you're dressed really nice. You're like in a tuxedo. You take your wife, she's looking great. You go to this party and you're groomed, you're looking fantastic. But back home,
On the 9.
yeah, on the nose. Back home, your place is a wreck. Your bed is not made. You got a pile of laundry on the ground. Your bathroom counter is a disaster. You've got unpaid bills scattered across your table. You got dishes in the sink. Your whole environment is in disarray. Even your electronic environment, like you open your phone, there's notifications all over the place. Your computer, everything's disorganized. Your home screen is just, you have all these like 100 tabs open. No matter how much you fake it in front of people at this party, no matter how much you try to be suave and slick and cool, there will be a little part of you that is dedicated to reminding you consistently that you are a fraud. You are not who you're pretending to be right now. And that is going to show up. No matter how hard you try to hide it, other people will start to catch on that this guy was saying all the right stuff. He looked great. Everything was perfect, but something, I don't know, like something was off. That's what that is. It's that thing leaking through. So that's the first thing, is your environment. The next thing, the next piece that's a lot more likely to leak through is time. How do you manage your time? Are you always in a hurry? Are you always late? Are you always living in the moment and never thinking ahead? Are you never planning ahead for the next thing? Are you always in a rush? Are you never taking a look at your calendar and budgeting time and energy for the things that are coming up on your calendar? That stuff shows up. You're in a conversation with someone and they're antsy and they're fidgeting and they're just thinking, they're always like anxious and thinking about the thing that's coming next. That's a person who has very poor time management. And that stuff shows up in a conversation. So the environment, time. The next one is appearance. Appearance isn't just the way you dress. It's not just the way you groom yourself. It's also your physical and your health appearance. So how does your health appear to other people? If a stranger saw a picture of you, a complete stranger saw a photo of you, how would they rate your health from 1 to 10? So it's like seeing yourself from that perspective. Like, how would a complete stranger who's never seen or heard of you before rate you on a scale of 1 to 10 for how healthy they think you are? And so this is your diet, this is your sleep, this is everything you do to affect the way that you show up. And this is a more obvious one. Like, you're in a conversation with somebody and like they have all the other things down, but they just don't take care of themselves. Their hair is disheveled, they're like overweight. It affects the way that you perceive them. They could be the most credible person in the room, but if they don't take care of themselves, that has a huge impact on the way that they're perceived. So there's environment, time, appearance. The next one is social. This is what we just spent a lot of time talking about, your social skill. You could be the most isolated person on the planet. Like, you could be, like we talked about, this newer generation growing up in front of a screen and not really a lot of inherent social skill. But then sometimes these people go to an event or they meet up with their friends in person, or there's something happens where they meet with people in person and they try to fake like they have social skills. And I know this because this was me for a long time. You show up and you try to fake sounding like someone you're not. You try to fake sounding like the influencer that you saw on an Instagram reel, or you listen to this podcast and you try to sound like that guy from the podcast because he sounded really cool. So I'm going to try to emulate that for my friends so that they can approve of me. So a person who is not genuinely skilled at having good conversations and genuine conversations, that's going to show up. So there's environment, time, appearance, social, and then the last one, this is the big one, and this is the hardest one to hide. This is the most difficult one to hide. And it's the one that affects the most people, I think, and it's financial. So your financial habits, your money management. Are you good with your money? Do you save money? What's your relationship with money? And a little fun fact, the way someone treats their time is almost identical to the way they treat their finances. You look at anybody who's like having trouble with time, look at anybody who's having trouble with time or like they struggle with time management, I guarantee you 99 times out of 100, they also struggle with finances. Show me somebody who struggles with finances, I guarantee you they also struggle with time. Those are two resources that people treat very similarly. People treat their time and their finances very similar.
That is hilarious because I just thought in that moment where for myself, with both time and with money, I budget in the big things. Like I always like the things that I like need to do and like very important to me. But anything that's like, if you put on a scale of 1 to 10, anything that's like below a 5,
Yeah.
it doesn't get budgeted in. It's just like, it'll happen in the gaps.
Yeah.
And like, whether that's conversations I need to have, things I need to do for work, or, buying just random grocery stuff that isn't like what I consider to affect the big picture. It
Yeah.
does, but
Yeah.
that's hilarious because, I see how they are, I'd say identical.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely identical.
So like for you, you put more emphasis and focus on the dollars, and you're a little bit more careless with the pennies.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
But it's better to be that way than the opposite. It's better to be that way than to put all of your focus on the pennies and then be reckless with the dollars. So in some way, that's not bad that you're like that, because it could be worse. It could be a lot worse.
Yeah, it's just so interesting because I never really put those two things together. So
Yeah.
that's cool. That's cool.
Yes.
It makes a lot of sense.
Connect the dots, man. Yeah, it's interesting stuff. But yeah, man, you were asking originally how like a person walks into a room and like they gain that attentional captivity and that
Yeah.
focus and that trust before they've even said a word. That's how it's all those, it's an accumulation of those little things, and then there's other stuff too. There's obviously more to it, but those are like, if you think about it as like a pyramid, that's like the base of the pyramid. Those habits, those little things, those areas of our lives, that's what holds all the other stuff up. So if you're watching this and if you feel like one or more of those areas need some attention, I would start there before you start memorizing sales scripts.
And I think it's super accurate, right? Like I've definitely had times where, especially working from home, right? Since that whole shift happened and now being someone from working from home, and I'm curious on your experience too, but I find if my office is a disaster, right? Like if I have things just set out, I haven't put stuff away, my
Hmm.
brain feels chaotic. But if I
Oh yeah.
like clean everything up and just have like clean, I feel like I can go in with so much more focus and
Yeah.
like brain. It's almost like the physical clutter clutters my mind.
Oh yeah, 100%. I am the same exact way. I cannot work in my office if I know that downstairs, all the way the fuck on the other side of the house, there's dishes in the sink. I can't. It's impossible. I can't. I can't do work if I like my desk, if everything is not exactly where it needs to be. Everything has a home. Everything has its own little home. And so if everything is not in its home, I can't function properly. And it's your outer environment is just a reflection of your inner environment. And so if your outer environment is in disarray, it means that there's some area of your mind that's in disarray. And the desk being a mess or the dishes in the sink, that's just a manifestation of what's going on in here. So yeah, do your dishes, clean up your desk, but also look inwards and figure out like what's going on here. Like what volume do I need to turn down in here? Like what television has the volume on too high that I need to turn down inside my mind so that this stuff doesn't happen again. But I
And
resonate,
how can you
man.
do that? How can you do that? Because I hear that and it makes sense to me, but then
Yeah.
I don't know how to action that.
There's tons of things you can do. Meditate, journal, mindfulness. You want to know what I do?
Yeah, please.
Nothing will force you into the present moment any more effectively than exposure to the cold. Whether it's like a cold shower, a lot of people do like that cold plunge or the cold shower. Um, you're in New Zealand, but here in the States, it's freezing cold right now. It is freezing cold. So what I do every morning is I hate the cold. I'm like I was born with a lazy gene. Like there are lazy genes in my bone marrow. I don't like doing hard stuff. I don't like doing uncomfortable stuff. So that's why I do them. And so I wake up every morning and it fucking sucks. But I go out there and I put on a weighted vest, 32-pound weighted vest, and I just go on a very heavy, hilly 7-mile walk in the freezing cold. And if you're distracted about something, if you're worried about something, if you're anxious about something, get your ass into the cold, whether it's the cold water, the cold air, just expose yourself to cold for a prolonged period of time. I guarantee you, after not very long in the cold, all that stuff will go away. Um, nothing will nothing will kill your dreams faster than the cold, too. So like you think you're an ambitious guy, you think you're like a badass, nothing can hurt you. You think you got all these lofty goals. Go out there on a cold run or like do a cold shower, and that'll test you. Like that'll test. So force yourself into something. That's just what I do. It forces me to be ultra present. Like I can't be thinking about appointments when I am like I feel like there are daggers. Like the wind is so sharp, it's like daggers slicing my face open. I can't be thinking like it is impossible for me to be thinking about the next thing when I need to be ultra present. So I'd say a really good way to turn down that noise is just figure something out that works for you, because the cold thing doesn't work for everybody. Figure something out that works for you that allows you to just stay extremely present, extremely aware, and just reflect. Anything that involves quiet, anything that involves just being in your own thoughts and just observing. Tons of things, but just find what works for you, and give yourself that space, man. And this is going to sound really woo woo, and this is going to sound like there's going to be dudes watching this like, oh, that bullshit. That's for those energy healers on YouTube. This stuff is so important, man. Like mindfulness and finding time for yourself, meditating, all that stuff is super important. It's critical. So if you have noise in your head, if you have noise in your brain, I'd look into that stuff to help you out with that.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. What I'd like to touch on next, and it's something that was a revelation to me when I first found Chase. I don't know why. I think it was one of the podcasts that I listened to, or maybe just one of his YouTube clips. But it was about the gut, and it was about that you can actually impact gut feelings. I
Yeah.
always thought gut feelings were just gut feelings. You didn't get to choose. You're giving them, you're receiving them. But like when he touched on it, and I want you to go through and tell me your perspective on it. But when he went in and he told me about like the fact that you can actually influence how your gut relates to other people and how that feeling that we all get every single day, how we can actually, drive that and impact what that feeling is, that blew my mind. It really did.
100%. Yeah. So there are verbal and nonverbal ways to do this. The nonverbal ways, we pretty much just covered that. Like everything we talked about with the habits and everything you do off camera, those are the very exact things that influence the gut feeling that you send to other people. And the way it works with gut feelings, to get a little nerdy for a second,
Please, let's do it.
the way it works is if you're in a situation or a conversation with somebody, we talked about like the different parts of the brain. There's that mammalian brain, and then there's our human brain. So we have a mammal brain, human brain. Our mammal brain is an expert at reading body language. It's already an expert. It comes out of the womb an expert at picking up on signals and reading and human behavior. It's, it already knows all this stuff. If I'm in a conversation with someone and everything's going good, they're saying all the right things, they're doing all the right things, they're gesturing the right way, they're raising their eyebrows at the right time, they're smiling, they're doing all the right things, but there's just something that's not quite right. Like you've had a situation like that. We all have. We've all been in those situations where something's just not adding up. What's happening is our mammalian brain is seeing something. It spotted the thing. It knows what the thing is. It could be blink rate. It could be a lip compression. It could be the way they raise their shoulder. It could be when they're thinking they look to down and to the left instead of down and to the right, and we just didn't notice the difference. It could be anything. It could be the speed at which they open and close their eyes when they blink. It could be the smallest thing. Our mammalian brain has seen it and has recorded it. The problem is our mammalian brain does not speak English. It doesn't speak language. Remember, it doesn't know what language is. And so what's happening is it can't just send a text message up to the human brain. It can't just send a direct like a DM and say, "Hey, ping, I just saw this thing, be on the lookout for this." It can't do that. It can't communicate with the human part of our brain. We can't interpret it. So what it does, the way that it communicates with us is through a gut feeling. It gives us, it's kind of like it rings the internal alarm to let you know that it saw something. And so when you get a gut feeling, when you feel off about a situation, or when you feel there is something off in a situation, that is a very real internal mechanism and an internal process that's happening inside of your brain. It's not just some like, "Oh, my mother always told me to always listen to your gut." It's not just some wives' tale. That's a real neurological, biological, physiological thing that's happening. And sometimes understanding the mechanics of something and how something works can make it easier to deal with when you're in that situation. So like if you're in a situation and you get a gut feeling, you can go, it's no longer this mysterious thing, because now you can go, "Oh, wait a minute. I know what's happening. Oh, this part of my brain's trying to talk to this part of my brain. This is what's happening." Okay. So it's easier to conceptualize. We can absolutely influence the gut feeling of other people. The most powerful way to do it is just through who you are. Like you can always, there's linguistic ways, there's verbal ways, there's techniques you can do to create trust in another human. Like I can tell you a story about,
Please.
when I was at the gym one time and I found a wallet stuffed with cash in the parking lot. And I picked it up, had the guy's ID, all of his credit cards. There was like 170, 180 bucks in cash in there. And I started panicking for this guy because I looked at his license, looked like a young guy. And I'm like, okay, this guy, he's a young guy. He's probably freaking out that he lost his wallet. So I immediately went to the nearest, it was in this like parking lot of the gym, but the gym is connected to all these different buildings. There's a FedEx there. So I immediately went into FedEx. I'm like, "Hey, I need to ship this to this guy's house. Just overnight it if you can." And the only thing I was thinking about is getting this wallet back to this guy. I wasn't thinking about anything else. I was shaking for this guy, because you think about losing, your whole life is in your wallet. And I just wanted to get the wallet back. So that story I'm telling you, the reason I'm telling you that story, what is the hidden communication under that story? What am I really telling you under that story? What I'm really telling you is I'm a trustworthy person and you can trust me. So I am silently and covertly invoking a sense of trust, and I am positively influencing a good gut feeling inside of you by telling that story. That's a true story, by the way. That really happened. But I can use that if I feel like I am in a situation where I need to invoke rapid trust and I need to touch a positive gut feeling. I can use methods like that. But again, that was a really loud slam with my ring, and it made me sound angrier than I actually am. Again, what I want to
interrupt.
There's that stick snapping again. What I want to emphasize is it's not the shit that you say that creates that gut feeling. It's not the shit that you say. It's not the things you say. It is who you are. So like you could tell that same exact story, but if you're a piece of shit and you're telling that story, it's going to land differently. It's going to give people a different gut feeling than if you actually meant it and you're doing it with good intentions. So yes, you can absolutely 100% manipulate. I hate using the word manipulate because people have negative connotations with that word. You can alter and intentionally affect the gut feeling of people that you interact with.
Massively. I mean, man, like I don't know about you. I Gut feelings to me, when it came to making any large decision, I always went with my gut. I don't know why, like, like you said before, right? It's like mom always tells you, trust your gut, right? Um, and I never knew any of the science behind it, but I always knew that my gut it had my back. I was like, that's a feeling from inside. I was like, you can't ignore those feelings. But
Yeah.
it's exactly that. When you start explaining it, and once you do understand it, it almost becomes another like tool in your arsenal where it's like, oh my gosh, like I now get to pick up what my body's saying and start to dissect so I can physically start to look, what am I missing? What did I do? And that's one thing I found very interesting. Now when I feel a good gut feeling or a bad gut feeling, starting to like look at the person, and especially if like mentally I feel like, yeah, this all makes sense, but I get a bad gut feeling, is starting to look for those red flags and be like, where is it? Because it has to be somewhere.
Yep. Exactly. Awareness is key there. What you're not aware of can literally ruin your life. And this goes with everything. Like if you're on a date with somebody, like if a girl is on a date with a guy and she's not aware of the 15 red flags that he's giving off that are disguised with like fake charisma and like fake charm and all that shit. If she is not aware of those things, if she's kind of oblivious to her gut feeling and instinct in that situation and she's dismissing it as, oh, I'm just nervous, that could lead to her getting into a very abusive situation or a very dangerous situation. And so I think it's really important to be able to just be aware. You don't even have to know what everything is. You don't even have to understand what a lip compression means or what a a double shrug versus a single. You don't have to be sciencey and know all the data. You just have to be aware that there is something happening. And as a byproduct of that awareness, you'll have your guard up. You'll be more diligent. You'll be more sharp. You'll be more focused, and you'll be more intentional with the interaction. And that's the most important thing because your mindset, if you have an aware and a very intentional mindset, that dictates everything. I mean, everybody knows this. Your mindset dictates your entire life, and if you can shape and sharpen your mindset to just be more aware and pick up on these little things and just be intentional with these little things, it can really shape unbelievable outcomes for you.
And I think that's the interesting thing, right? Is I feel like for myself, because that's all I can talk about, right? Is my own personal opinion and self uh, life experience, if you will. Is I feel like I've always had these things that I knew inside, right? Like trusting my gut feeling and like being aware. But what I've really loved about following Chase and talking to people like yourself, Cameron, is starting to understand why those things made sense in my head.
Yeah.
Because it used to be they just made sense and like I couldn't explain it to someone else, but like for the first time I'm being like, oh, that's why I pick up on that behavior and like it or don't like it or, feel good about this type of person, don't feel good about this type. I already knew those things, but
Yeah.
I had no idea. I was just trusting my body's innate feeling.
Yeah. That's the name of the game, man. It's just if we can add a label to something, it allows us to call upon that thing faster. It's the same thing as like think about when you get a. Do you have any pets?
Yeah, I got two dogs.
You have two dogs. Okay, cool. So like when you go and get your dog, like you get a dog for the first time, what's the first thing you do? The first thing you do is you name the dog. Sometimes the dog will already have a name, but like if you're getting a brand new puppy, like let's say your dog has puppies, first thing you do is you name, if you decide to keep it, you name the puppy. You add a
100%.
label to the thing. And what does that do? What that does is adding a name to something allows you to call upon the dog faster. So like if I have a name for my dog, I can get the dog to come to me when I call its name. Whereas if the
Mm.
dog doesn't have a name, then yeah, sometimes the dog will come to me on accident, but I won't know why. I won't like yeah, I understand that it makes sense, but I'm not going to know why. Like what happened? How did I get that to work? But if I have a label for it, I can go, "Okay, Max, come." and I can call upon it a lot more effectively and a lot faster. And you're having a lot of things are clicking
Yeah.
for you. I
Yeah,
can
yeah,
see
yeah. That
it.
just that's great.
Yeah,
That makes so much sense. Oh,
yeah.
I love this. I love
And
this stuff.
so if you if you can just label some of these things, like the gut feeling thing, if you can just add a label to, okay, I know exactly what's happening. This is my mammalian brain. This is my mammalian brain talking to my human brain. You've just attached some labels to these processes, to these things, and to these mechanisms. That gives you power. That gives you awareness. That allows you to call upon that awareness faster when you're in a situation like that. Or like if you see somebody that you don't know, you've never seen this person before, it's a complete stranger, but a part of you goes, I don't like that guy. We've all had
Hmm.
that. We've all had that. The reason why that's happening is because you're seeing a part of yourself in that guy that you don't like. That's the only reason that's happened. The only reason you see somebody that you don't know and you immediately don't like them is because they are exhibiting a quality or qualities that you work very hard to conceal in yourself. So you spend a lot of effort and time concealing something that somebody else just openly displays. That's where judgment comes from. And that's why you don't like someone when you see someone. And so now that you're smiling because now that you have that label, you are going to immediately see that the next time you're in a situation where you come across somebody that you're not a big fan of, you're going to go, oh, wait a minute, what is it about that person that I don't like about me? That's the question that you have to ask, and that's not that's never usually a very comfortable answer that comes with that, but it's all labels, man. If we can just attach a label to something, if we can label the dance move, then we can call upon the dance move when it's time to dance. The step after this, because everything is in phases. Phase one is, can I label the dance move? Phase two is, can I perform the dance move? Phase three is, can I create my own dance, and can I keep dancing even when the music changes? And so that's kind of the level that we want to get to, is can we make this a part of us? Can I label this stuff, identify it, but can I also just make it a part of, just a natural part of who I am? And that's the difference between like an amateur and a master, because a master will just embody this stuff, whereas an amateur knows the stuff and they stop at the labels. But not to get too ahead of everything, but that's just the natural progression, man. There's always phases to this thing.
What are you doing these days? Because I know you're working with Chase and you're doing some form of coaching, but like, what does that actually look like? Can you shed a little bit of light about like what you're doing and who you're helping? Like, just walk me through that whole piece.
I can, but if I tell you, I'll have to kill you.
Damn it, I don't want to die.
Yeah, no, I absolutely can share. I am. I had to go to become a coach. I had to go through a certification process with his company, with Chase's company. It's called NCI, Neurocognitive Intelligence. It's what that stands for. And with neurocognitive intelligence, there are four phases. There's four levels of NCI. There's NCI 1, which is a very rudimentary understanding of behavior profiling. So this is what we just talked about, labels. NCI 1 is all about, do you understand the definition of all the labels? It's a multiple choice test that you take online and you fill in the blank, and it tests your knowledge of, do you understand what significance need means? Do you understand what visual sensory preference means? Do you understand what a shoulder shrug means? Can you fill in the blanks? Can you identify and label the dance moves? NCI 2 is, can you perform those dance moves? So, can you look at a clip of a police interrogation and identify all the deception indicators and tell what the person was likely lying about? That's NCI 2. It's a little bit more advanced. NCI 3 is, can you go out on stage and do a routine? Like, can you perform a whole
Hmm.
routine on stage, under pressure, under the lights, in front of mom and dad, in front of a crowd? And what that is Like, hey, let's say two people are at a campfire and one of them is wearing this and they have these kind of tattoos. The other one is wearing this and they have this kind of a watch on. What is their behavior profile? And you see them getting in an argument. How would you de-escalate the one with the tank top and the tattoos? What would you say and de-escalate? So this is, can you go out and dance? In CI 4, this is the Jedi stuff. This is the stuff that takes years to train for. This is stuff that you can't like just go practice or read a book and then take this. This is stuff where you have to have the stuff in you. NCI 4 is the composure test. This is where you are put in a very stressful, like simulated environment, and you have to be able to improvise on the spot. So an example would be, Liam, you're pulled over by a cop. You're going 160 miles an hour on an 80 mile per hour road. You're going 80 miles per hour over the speed limit. You get pulled over. You got to talk your way out of the ticket. Go. No other context. No other, like, if you don't talk your way out of that, if you don't use tradecraft to talk your way out of that ticket, you are going to jail. You are going to jail. So it's a high stakes, high pressure situation, and you only get one shot. So the idea there is, if I had one match left, I better not fuck up. Like if if I'm in a situation where I only have one bullet, like there's one bullet and I need to make this shot count, I better not fuck up. And I got to do it under stress, and I have to do it completely composed and calm under stress. So that's the progression. So all of this to say, that's the progression I had to go through with NCI. Those are the rites of passages that I had to go through in order to get my coaching belt. And so what I coach people on now is I coach people from all different walks of life. One of the cool things about Chase and his community is it's not niche. It's not a very like a niche down thing. It is everyone and anyone. There are people in that group, in that community, that are police officers, law enforcement, military. There's people in there that are doctors. There's a couple of politicians in there. There's people that work for the Department of Defense. There's people who are therapists, psychiatrists. There are people who are hypnotherapists, like they do hypnosis. There are professional magicians in there. And then there are also single moms who struggle with confidence. There are college students who want to learn how to communicate better and read people better. There are people who are in abusive relationships who want to learn how to spot signs and spot cues so that they can avoid abuse. There's all sorts of people with all sorts of different things they need coached on, but all of the coaching that someone needs, all of the coaching that I give people falls into one of three buckets. And these three things we covered before. It's profiling or reading people. It is communication. And then it's self-mastery. So confidence, authority, relationship with yourself, discipline, that kind of thing. It's one of those three things: self-management, self-mastery, observation, and then communication. It's one of those three things that I coach people on. And so my job is, if I get on a coaching call, my job is to whittle down what exactly it is that you need coaching on. Because sometimes people will say like, oh, I need communication. I need to get better at communication. And then after a few questions, it turns out it's actually a confidence thing, not a communication thing. So my job as a professional, my job as a coach is to figure out where people need help, which one of those buckets do they fall in, and then give them very tailored coaching around that thing. And so that's how I help people, and that's who I help.
That's awesome. And if someone wants to, come and work with, well, get help from yourself, get help from Chase, where do they find you guys? Is this like, backroom secrets happening? Like, how can they find you and reach out to you guys? What does that look like?
So you got to get an Onion browser, and you have to familiarize yourself with the dark web, and then you got to go and get a Tor browser. No, you want to find me? Just find me on Facebook, Camron W. Sayyah, Sayyah. shoot me a message, add me as a friend, shoot me a message, and strike up a conversation, and we'll see where it goes, and we'll see if it's right for you, and we'll take it from there. Best place to find me is Facebook. I'm hardly on Instagram. The only time I'm on Instagram is to send a barrage of reels of cats to my wife. That's I send her as many reels as I can, and then at the end of the day, before we go to bed, we just sit there and watch those reels. But Facebook is the best place to find me.
Well, Cameron, I thank you so much for coming on, man. It's
Yeah.
been very insightful. There's been some really cool things that you've touched light on. Um, any last bits that you would give as your last piece of advice for someone coming into the world of psychology?
Yes. Don't um, don't give up when it gets overwhelming. Psychology, human behavior is a very overwhelming thing. There's a lot of information, and it will take you easily 2 or 3 lifetimes to even scratch the surface of it. Like, I can confidently say that if I live to 100, 120 years old, I will be nowhere near 1% of 1% of understanding this thing. And I'm okay with that. I'm 100% okay with that. Take it in day tight compartments. Take it one day at a time, and don't compete with anyone on anything except just being a little bit better than you were yesterday, a little bit more knowledgeable than you were yesterday. And please avoid the trap of stopping at knowledge. Don't just fill up a bunch of notebooks. Don't just fill up a bunch of pieces of paper with concepts and ideas and definitions and bullet points. Take notes, but go out there and implement. Do the thing. Because if you're in a situation where you're kidnapped and you're tied up and you're thrown in the back of a trunk, that stack of notebooks you got with all the pretty notes and the neat handwriting, that's not going to save you. It's what's in you that's going to save you. I was in a situation recently where I had a gun pulled on me. This was the day after Christmas. Just a couple weeks ago, day after Christmas, I had a gun pulled on me. Guy followed me into a parking lot, road rage, pulled a gun on me, and I was able to use tradecraft to not only get the guy to lower his gun, but he stuck out his hand. He shook my hand. He apologized profusely, and then we ended up laughing, and he offered to buy me a beer. This took me 30 seconds. And this is not because I just learned some cool new technique. This is because I had drilled those things so much to the point where it's woven into the fabric of my DNA. So take it a day at a time. Don't stop just because you get overwhelmed, and drill. Don't stop at the knowledge. Knowledge is a completely different thing than skill. Make it a skill. So that's my advice, and I hope that helps. Thank you for having me on, man.
It's been a pleasure. Guys, make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. Reach out with who you want to see on next. And if you're trying to find Cameron, hit him up on Facebook. Like you said, Cameron W. Sayyah, and you'll be able to touch base with him. See if he can help you out. Thank you for listening.
Peace.